The humans were not to be molested. The few times they'd run into resistance, one from a group of particularly stupid bandits, they had successfully demonstrated the effectiveness of classical Roman short sword and shield combat techniques against charging Mardukans without ever being forced to resort to bead rifles or plasma cannon. But thanks to the stories which had run before them, any potentially ill-intentioned locals had known that those terrifying off-world weapons lurked in reserve, and had no desire at all to see them any more closely than that. The bronze barbarians of the Empress's own, veterans all, were well aware of the advantages inherent in a fearsome reputation. This one had come with a higher price tag than they had ever wanted to pay, but it also meant that they'd been able to travel for several weeks with virtually no incidents. That happy state of affairs had given them time to lick their wounds and get ready for the next hurdle, the mountains. Julian had been off guard duty the night before, but Nimachet Despraux had had the last shift. Now, as he stood grinning hugely into the semi-dark, she smiled at him, while groans sounded across the camp. The female sergeant bent over the fire, picked something up, and walked over to where he was dancing in delight. "Hot coffee," she offered, extending the cup with a grin. The company had practically given up the beverage. It was just too hot on Marduk in the morning. "Oh, thank you, the NCO chortled. He took the cup and sipped the brew. "God, that tastes awful. I love it." "It's bloody freezing," Corporal Kane grumped. "How cold is it?" Julian asked, diving back into his bivvy tent for his helmet. 23 degrees, Despraux told him with a fresh smile. 23? Groningen asked, furrowing his brow as he sniffed the cool air. "What's that in Fahrenheit?" 23! Julian laughed. "Shit! I'd set my air conditioning to 23. "Something like 73 or 74 Fahrenheit, Despraux said with a laugh of her own. "This feels much colder," the big Asgardian said stoically. If he was cold, it wasn't showing. Not cold, but a bit chilly. "We've been out in over a 40-degree heat for the last 2 months," the squad leader pointed out. "That tends to adjust your perspective." "Uh-oh," Julian said, looking around. "I wonder how the scummies are handling this." "What's wrong with him, Doc?" Prince Roger had awoken, shivering, to find Cord seated cross-legged in the tent, still and motionless. Repeated attempts to get the 6-limbed, grizzly bear-sized Mardukan shaman to wake up had resulted only in slow groans. "He's cold, sir." The medic shook his head. "Really cold." Warrant Dobrescu pulled the monitor back from the Mardukan and shook his head again, his expression worried. "I need to go check the Mahouts. If Cord is in this bad a shape, they're going to be worse. Their cover isn't as good." "Is he going to be okay?" the anxious prince asked. "I don't know. I suspect that he's probably sort of hibernating, but it's possible that if they get too cold, something will shut down and kill them." Dobrescu took another breath and shook his head. "I've been meaning to do a really thorough study of Mardukan body chemistry and physiology. It looks like I waited a bit too long." "Well, we need—" the prince began, only to break off at the sound of shouting from outside the tent. "Now what the hell is that?" "Motherpuckers, let me go!" Portenia shouted. He snarled at the laughing Marines who were crawling out of their one-person tents to sniff at the morning air. "Gimme a fucking hand, damn it!" "Okay, everybody," St. John J. said, slowly clapping. "Let's give him a hand." "Now that," Roger said, "is a truly disgusting ménage à cinq is the term you're looking for," Doc Dobrescu said, laughing as he walked over to the pinned armorer and the 4 comatose Mardukans wrapped tightly about his diminutive form. Roger shook his head and chuckled. but he also waved to the Marines. "Some of you guys, help the duck." St. John J. grabbed one of Donat's inert arms and started trying to disengage it from the armorer. "This really is gross, Portenia," the Marine said as he tried to pull one of the slime-covered arms off the armorer. "You fucking tell me? I wake up and it's nothing but arms and slime." Roger began to haul on Tratton as the Mardukan groaned and resisted the pulling Marines. "They seem to like you, Portenia." "Well," the armorer's response sounded mildly strangled. "They're trying to kill me now. Let go!" "They like his heat," the warrant officer grunted as he helped Roger heave, then said something unprintable under his breath and gave up. The united efforts of 3 Marines had so far been unable to get Donat to release his grip, and the bear hug actually did threaten to kill the armorer. "Somebody build a fire. Maybe if we warm them up, they'll let go." "And somebody help me get cord," Roger said, then thought about the weight of the Mardukan. Several somebodies. He looked over to the picket lines where the mahouts made their camp. "Did anybody notice that the pack beasts are missing?" he asked bemusedly. "We passed through a cold front," the medic said, shaking his head, "or what passes for one on this screwy planet." Captain Ponner had called a council of war to consider the night's events. The group sat near the edge of the camp, looking down on the forest of clouds that stretched into the distance from their foothills perch. Above them, the true mountains loomed trackless. "What cold front?" Julian asked. "I didn't see any cold front." "You remember that rain we had yesterday afternoon?" Dobrescu asked. "Sure, but it rains all the time here," the NCO replied skeptically. "But that one went on for a long time," Roger noted. "Usually they just sort of hit in short spurts. That one rained and rained and rained." "Right," the medic nodded. "And today the air pressure is a few points higher than yesterday. Not much. This planet doesn't have much in the way of a weather system, but enough. Anyway, the cloud layer got suppressed." He gestured to the clouds. "The humidity fell and the temperature dropped like a rock," Ponner said. "We got that part. Can the locals handle it?" The medic sighed and shrugged. "That I don't know. Most terrestrial, isothermic, and posithermic creatures can survive to just above freezing temperatures as long as they don't stay that way too long. However, that's terrestrial." He shrugged again. "With Mardukans, Captain, your guess is probably as good as mine. I'm a doc, not an exobiologist." He looked around at the camp, and especially at the Flarta. "The pack beasts now, they seem to be better adapted. They burrowed underground last night on first watch and stayed there till things warmed back up. And their skin is different from the Mardukans, scaled and dry, where the Mardukans is smooth and mucus-coated. So I think the pack beasts can make it, if we stay below the freezing line. But I don't know about the locals," he finished unhappily, gesturing at Cord and the lead mahout. They had been speaking in the dialect of Quincock, so that the 2 Mardukan representatives could follow the conversation. Now Cord clapped his hands and leaned forward. "I can withstand the conditions of last night with Dinshon exercises. However," he waved a true hand at Dolen Pa, "the mahouts are not trained in them, nor are any of my nephews, except Denat, and he poorly. Also," he pointed to patches on his skin, "it is terribly dry up here, and it will only get worse from what Shaman Dobrescu says." "So," said Ponner, "we have a problem." "Yes," Dolen Pa said. The old mahout looked terrible in the light of mid-morning. Part of that was the same dry patches that affected Cord, but the greater part was bitter shame. "We cannot do this much longer, Lord Ponner, Prince Roger. This is a terrible, terrible place. There is no air to breathe. The wind is as dry as sand. The cold is fierce and terrible." He looked up from the scratches he'd been making on the ground with his mahout stick. "We cannot go any farther." Ponner looked over at Roger and cleared his throat.